All right, I think we are ready to go. So thank you guys. Welcome back to everybody. And we are in the home stretch of this 3-day meeting of the minds, which has just been incredible. I'm still processing the scientific days, and family day is going just as well. So thank you guys so much for being here. We just had our breakout rooms, and I wanted to start with a poll. We'll see if this works. But basically, the reason for the breakout rooms that we just had with a small group of the families that volunteered was to understand a little bit about more of what we're looking for. What would a disease-modifying therapy look like? And we're just beginning to scratch the surface of what is going to be a detailed conversation, but I wanted to put out a poll to everybody who is listening. So here is the poll question. It requires a little bit of explanation. So for those of you in the Zoom room that were part of the discussion, you have a poll that just popped up, and you can actually vote. And I'll read the question in just a second. Those of you that are watching on the live stream, I would love for you to just type into the chat your answer. You can type into the chat box A, B, or C, and that would be really helpful. So basically, here's the question. If you're thinking about the 3 biggest medical issues, we're all dealing with lots of issues, but we're just thinking about medical issues right now for your loved one with LGS, the ones that they're facing right now. Tell us what you want the next LGS treatment that you try to do for them. And there's 3 choices. I know there's going to be a lot more choices in the future, but right now we're just getting a sense of, do you want the next treatment to stop the progression of LGS and improve 100% all of those 3 medical issues that you're thinking about? That would be answer A. Do you want to stop the progression of LGS and improve some of the issues? Or is your answer totally different than either of those 2? And so if you're in the Zoom room, if you guys can vote, that would be great. And we're gonna see how many people vote, and we'll cancel that. And if you're in the live stream, if you just in the chat type A, B, or C, this is information that we're collecting just as we move forward and start to have this conversation with you as the community that we know best how to sort of target our questions as we move forward. So we'll give it another minute. So for the 3 medical issues, the top 3, because I'm sure there's more than 3 if your loved one is anything like any other LGS loved one I've ever met. If you're thinking about the top 3, what do you want the next LGS treatment to do for those 3 medical issues that are on your highest priority? You want them to stop the progression and improve all of those issues, stop the progression and improve some of the issues, or none. So awesome. All right, we'll give it another minute. So some of you might be thinking, oh, okay, why is she asking this, right? And we get asked a lot, right? If we were to create a disease modifying therapy, what is the expectation? What is it that families want? And, I think we know that there are probably, 100 issues that we want help with. And so narrowing it down to the top, 2 or 3 is really important. And that we know that the top 2 or 3 is going to be different for every family member, right? We're all dealing with slightly different issues. Most of us are going to say seizures, but not all of us. And then we get asked by people that work at the FDA and other places, well, what is it that they want? Do they want a complete reversal of every symptom ever? Do they want a slight improvement? Do they want, is it just seizures? Is it more than seizures? And so those are the conversations we're starting to have right now. So all right, just a few more seconds to vote, and then we'll see how people responded. All right, Jeff, do you want to close it? And all right, so hopefully most of you guys can see the poll here, and I'm sliding it over. So 41% of people said stop the progression and improve all of the issues, all 3 of them. And then 59% said stop the progression and improve some of the issues, and nobody said none of the above. So awesome. Well, thank you guys for that. So for this last section, we want to talk a little bit about where we go next. And we were very deliberate in how we set up this meeting, where we brought together the scientists first and separately. And in the future, we want you to be in the same room as the scientists and be feeling comfortable talking to them. And but right now, we just thought it would be better to separate you. So because we don't know who in our science community is going to be there to sort of help us along the way. And we wanted to give them a chance to talk to each other, given this is really the first time that we've gotten them together in this way. So we had our organizers and they led a really robust discussion amongst the scientists. And the scientists came out with basically a number of different things that we can do in each of these areas. So clinical would be, like in the hospital setting or in the clinic. Basic science, that's where we're talking about animal models, right? And really not just drilling down to what brain regions, but what neurons in those brain regions are impacted and what channels, what proteins, what's happening down at that level. And is there something that we can do to make things better? And then translational, this is really in that stage of can we maybe do electrical signaling on patients, where we're moving it from experimental into the clinic. And they answered these based on research, and they answered them based on what's feasible in science right now. They did not answer them from the patient point of view. And so over the coming weeks and months, we're going to be asking you. But I think it comes down to a few things and we as a community need to look at this list of a few things. They're not in any particular order. We will need to rank them. We will need to see if they're the right things. But as we think about how we would like to spend the money that we've raised on research, we raised $60,000 at the walk this year that we will put towards scientific research. As we think about how we want to spend that and how we want to drive the research forward, there's a few things that we need to come up with our list, and then we need to prioritize that list. So again, in no particular order, we need to understand how LGS evolves. That's the first thing. So many of you have seen this slide before, but LGS evolves over time. So over here, time's at the bottom, and all the way over here on the right is LGS. You have LGS if you have, let's see, there we go. You have LGS if you have more than one type of seizure, if you have slow spike and wave, GPFA, cognitive impairments present in everybody after 5 years, seizure onset in the very young or refractory. And this is a network disorder. So we want to know, we want to treat LGS. And this is the LGS Foundation. So we want to fund research that treats LGS, that treats the EEG features of LGS. But we also want to be thinking about the earlier stages. Before our kids and loved ones had LGS, they had treatment-resistant epilepsy, and they may have had another syndrome like West syndrome. Before that, they had epilepsy, which is 2 or more seizures. Before that, they had their first seizure. And then, of course, the other seizure types and the developmental delay can emerge along this timeline. And before that, they had whatever their cause is, their etiology, whether it's genetic or it's hypoxic ischemia, meningitis, stroke, post chemotherapy, autoimmune, metabolic, they had their cause. And each of these dotted green lines here represents an intervention point. So we want to get the scientists thinking about LGS, and there's already a lot of scientists who are thinking about pre-LGS and this evolution to LGS. And we also want to keep our eye on that and how we might fund in those areas or work with the partner groups. There's a lot of partner groups, especially there's like an organization for each of the different genes and syndromes. There's an organization now called Hope for HIE around hypoxic ischemia. So there are other organizations that we can partner with to have the biggest bang. So I think we want to understand how LGS evolves over time. We also want to do research in all areas across the research landscape. And so we've talked a little bit about this, but basic science research is over here on the left. This is in the animal models. And I'm very happy to report that there is now what we think is an LGS animal model. There are a lot of seizure models. There's a lot of models around specific genes or specific brain injuries and those models may have LGS and nobody's ever looked, but we do have at least one mouse now that has features of LGS. We want to be looking across clinical trials, which is this middle part here, where they're moving drugs to treatment. And then we want to be looking at this. This is what physicians use to guide how they practice medicine. It's called the evidence-based medicine research pyramid. So at the top of that would be clinical practice guidelines. Randomized control trials are also on here. And then as you go down to the broader, larger base of the pyramid, the evidence becomes less and less compelling. Whereas at the top of the pyramid, it's very, very strong scientific evidence that it's a good treatment and it will work. We've already done some analysis, and I talked about this last week on the webinar that we had of work that's going on in each of these areas. Each of these last names are last names of doctors who the LGS Foundation has funded over the many years. They are grantees. So we funded quite a few, 6 people, to be looking at animal models. And I think that now that we're really close to having one, we believe we have one, at least one. So I think it's a really good investment. We know over here on the right side, we funded a number of grants across this evidence-based pyramid. Some of the deep brain stimulation research and some of the network research that I was talking about from Dr. Archer's lab, we funded, as well as research looking at specific treatments in LGS and looking at which medicines might work. We also know that there's a lot of research going on right now in clinical trials. There's 6 FDA-approved drugs for LGS, 7 FDA-approved treatments. There's also 3 FDA-approved treatments for seizure clusters and status epilepticus. Not specifically LGS, but for clusters and status, which are a huge problem. And then there's a number of clinical trials that are actively going on. And all of these treatments and trials are for symptomatic treatment of seizures. But it's so important that we have new options. We need options. And even though we want, to move towards a disease-modifying therapy, we don't know if no one's ever looked if these are disease modifying therapies. First, we have to figure out what that means to us and what we want. But also, it's so important that we have options to treat the seizures, because so many of our families are desperate for the next treatment. We also want to know across all of these areas what the key questions are. And we've started to ask you that here. And I've just highlighted a few in red. But so the gaps in the 3 in red here relate to the evidence-based pyramid. And the first one is we don't know which treatment is best for LGS. And that's a conversation that's going to be coming very soon. We're not learning from every patient. We don't have a disease-modifying therapy. We can't prevent it. We don't know. Most of the treatments don't work. So we begin to start to outline the questions that we as the patient community want answered. And we'll be coming to you and asking you if this is right or if we need to tweak it. We also know about clinical trials. Like a lot of people, the gaps here, people don't know about clinical trials. Oftentimes, families will say, I would participate in a clinical trial, but I don't know about them. No one's ever offered them to me. Or the trials are just so labor intensive that the families can't do it. In addition to families potentially losing access of the treatment, we've known some families that have had this. They've gone into a trial and the trial didn't pan out and they've lost access. And then, now previously, the scientists that are in our community, so there's no animal model, and we think that these kinds of things are changing. So we're beginning to fill in these gaps and are going to be asking your help. But we need to do research in all of these areas, basic, trial area, and in evidence-based medicine and clinical. We need disease-modifying therapies. I am very happy that we have 6 FDA-approved drugs and 7 FDA-approved treatments for LGS. But at a certain point, there's more than 40 anti-seizure meds on the market. Most of us have tried over 20 of them. How many do we need before we change our strategy? And so we want to start targeting the EEG of LGS. And then we want to start targeting pre-LGS and thinking about if you can treat the cause, great. And if we know from targeted therapies that they tend to not work for everybody. So if there is a treatment to the cause, to the gene, or to the injury, then but they still slip through, then how do we stop them from slipping through to the next level and evolving into LGS? We need disease modifying therapies. We know that if you can improve the slow spike and wave and the paroxysmal fast activity, that you can have better outcomes in patients. We know that slow spike and wave and GPFA are bad. So we want to target those. And we're beginning to understand where in the brain those things are coming from. We're not just understanding where, in the brain, the cortex leading to the brainstem, to the thalamus, et cetera, but we're also beginning to understand what networks are impacted, right? So the executive control network, right? And what that means, the default mode network. And there's some emerging evidence, in 15 LGS patients that you can write that abnormality in those networks if you can stop the slow spike and wave or the PFA, which is a really big deal. So targeting the EEG features of LGS is really starting to make sense as a way to find disease-modifying therapies. And we want to do that. We need to intervene early in pre-LGS, and I just want to touch on this again, going back to Dr. Grinspan's talk about early on, we could be targeting the cause. We could be targeting the infantile spasms. We could be targeting this quiet period between the first seizure showing up and then slow spike and wave showing up, or between slow spike and wave and the first tonic seizure showing up. We can target those now with treatments, high dose steroids, maybe ACTH, something along those lines, and see if those work. And I think that that's perfectly valid. And again, we have to go through these and prioritize them.
And Tracy, I have a question here that along those lines. What do we know about LGS primarily developing between ages 2 and 5?
What do we say it again, Jen?
What do we know about LGS primarily developing between 2 to 5?
Yeah, so LGS is an age-dependent disease. It happens in young children. Adults do not get LGS. They do not develop it if they start seizing in adulthood. It's something to do with seizing in the early years of life and a developmental time window. It doesn't matter really what your cause is. All of us with LGS have a different cause. And we may have had a different journey. Some of us had infantile spasms. Some of us didn't have infantile spasms prior. But all of us ended up with these same abnormal brainwaves. All that is the unifying. We all converge. It's like all these different highways converging onto one road. And once we're on that road, the prognosis is the same. The journey is very similar. The issues we're dealing with are very, very similar. And the thing that unites us are those abnormal brainwaves, which are a sign of the network not functioning. And the reason that it happens, nobody really knows, but they know that it happens because the brain is developing there's a critical window of development happening at that time to create the slow spike and wave. And so I think that that's a great question is what is it about the 3 to 5 year old brain that most LGS is diagnosed in that age window? We know a lot is happening, right? So the brain is fully wired at birth. And then the brain, there's a saying in neuroscience, cells that fire together, wire together. And so cells that one cell will send a signal to another cell. And when they both fire, that cell will make a stronger connection. And initially the brain creates a bunch of connections and then prunes all of the ones that aren't firing away. And that's what's happening in typical brain development. Now imagine you now have a kiddo with LGS, and that is trying to happen, the creation of all these extra, brain connections, and then they're trying to prune away, but it's happening while there's all these seizures going on. And what are seizures? Seizures are electrical activity. Cells are firing. That's what a seizure is. And so it doesn't happen right. And yet they all create the same abnormal network, the same EEG. And I think that that's a really important place where we can begin to study. But LGS is a developmental network disorder that stems from 1,000 different causes or more. And yet they all converge onto the same place. And why is that? And I think the answers lie by looking at the mice and really understanding the network, the parts of the brain where this is coming from. So I didn't mean to put this last, but I wanted to end on this because this is actually the most important thing is we need to know what matters to patients. And all of these things I've mentioned, again, we want to come back into the community and ask you, but we know there's this hierarchy of needs, and sitting in the discussion rooms, I heard a lot about this. I heard a lot of issues, but I still heard an emphasis on this crisis and this constant dependence, right? And the seizure emergencies. And so, is this right? Is this, it's really hard, it's the people always like, we need to have a seizure safe school for your daughter. It's like, I don't even have a seizure safe home. I don't know how we're going to get a seizure safe school or a seizure safe YMCA or a seizure safe grocery store, right? I mean, it's like, I don't even have things at home under control, right? It's like, well, let's talk about, her ability to read. I'm like, oh my gosh, like she can't feed herself, right? It's like, you kind of need to solve certain problems before you can think about these other, issues. And yet we're always thinking about these higher level issues. And so, is this where we want to focus and basically say, hey, listen, we need to do something about these constant crises and then this constant physical dependence. And we'll be sending out a survey to ask that. We need to understand what the other dimensions are, right? So if we say, if I've said, and you may disagree or you may agree, that we could stop seizures by putting a kid into a coma. So that suggests, which none of us want, so that suggests that it's more than just seizures. What is the more? And I can tell you for us, it's hormonal. Her seizure always worse when she ovulates and when she's on her period. And they not only does that seizure knock her out, and is she more likely to have a seizure, it will knock her out for hours, for days. She just sleeps more at the period. In addition to that, when she's on either ovulating or on her period, she's more likely to have a seizure when she's awake, which puts her in danger. Right. So to me, it's the seizures, but it's also sort of the time of day of the seizures and the time of month of those seizures. And then the other thing is behavior. Every day when we try to give her meds, it's this song and dance. I feel like we're just constantly trying to get her to take her meds, and it's just a battle every single day, 3 times a day. That could improve our quality of life. And the things that I cared about, that I care about now, are different than the things that mattered to me when she was very young versus when she was a teenager. Changes across the journey. So what matters to us? And there has been some really good work on this that's been done, but we care about outcomes, of course, quality of life, how complex the medication regimen or treatment regimen is, how effective it is, and how safe it is, right? We talked a lot about how these meds we're choosing between these meds used long-term that are killing our children slowly versus the seizures, which might be killing them more quickly, but both of them are killing them. But it's not just that. It's also patient and family costs. So there's medical out of pocket, there's non-medical costs, there's the cost of care for the future. And then there's also, the quality and the consistency of the evidence. We have lots of families who are using medicinal marijuana, right? Medical marijuana, and have different ratios that they're using, but maybe those aren't FDA approved. And so we care about that kind of stuff. Some people really care. Oh my gosh, it has to be FDA approved because I want to make sure it doesn't have, that what they say is in it. But then other people are like, no, I've got this other system. And so there's some things we care about that kind of go beyond just, stopping the seizures. And we need to define that. We need to know what matters most. So not only do we need the laundry list of all the issues we're dealing with, but we need to rank those in order, because the chances, if you said how many, what are Savannah's issues, I'd ask you, how much time do you have? There's probably 50, and we can't target all 50 of them. So which ones do we need to do first? Obviously we need to stop the death in our community. How many kids have we lost this year already? We need to stop the constant crisis, the status, the skull fractures, the broken arms, the ICU visits, the aspiration pneumonia, all of these things that needs to stop. And then our kids need to get some measure of independence so that, we're not constantly doing everything from feeding them to toileting them to wiping them to doing everything for them. But we also need to know how to measure that. There's a saying in science that if you can't measure it, then you can't track it and change it. And that's true. And we need to know how to measure those things once we know what they are. And we need patients involved in every aspect of research. I talked about this 10 to 17 year gap from something being discovered by scientists to getting to the patient experience. And we can help with that. We can help speed that up by offering up our voices, our experience, by telling them what to focus on, by helping them to understand the best way to create a clinical trial or the best way to intervene. We can help, and we want to help. And more, those that are working in the healthcare sector want our help. But at the same time, we are the ones who are really focused on the patient. I worked in academia. I've worked in a nonprofit. I've worked in a lot of places. And I think that advocacy groups and patients are the ones that could really say they're all about the patient. Other groups do really care about the patients, but they have other incentives that they need to achieve. So as an academic, I needed to get grants, I needed to get publications, I needed to get promotions. And I don't have any, and those are all wonderful things. I have nothing against academics who want those things, but that's different than what I wanted as a patient advocate for my child. I didn't care about my publications when I was in the science lab. I didn't care about grants as much as I cared about helping people. And so, the advocacy group, that's why I work in advocacy and not in academia anymore. Same thing if you're working with industry, like if pharmaceutical companies or device companies, they answer to their shareholders. They answer to their strategic portfolio and to their brand. So they have different incentives, not bad incentives, just different. The incentives, we need to try to figure out how to align our incentives together. Investors, same thing. They are beholden to the return on investment. Payers, like insurance payers, also have to have budget alignment and profitability. And then there's the government public funding sectors, right, where they have to do the public good, and we're a rare disease. We're the one group that can stand up and say, hey, LGS wants some love too. We want somebody to pay attention to our disease too. And I've heard so many leaders at this point say that they'd hate to have a disease where there's no advocacy organization, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And as we stand up, attention will be paid, but also we can help, and we can all work together. And so I'm so glad that you guys are here taking part in this. We can help at every stage, and we're going to be talking over the next few months about how patients can be involved at every stage. And research is not for everyone. Interacting with researchers, understanding this landscape, being involved in it is not for everyone. And that's perfectly fine. But we can have a voice in these, and many of us have had a voice, and we want to continue to have a voice as we try to save time and money and lives by moving the needle faster, by funding research, by working with our partners, by prioritizing what our biggest needs are, all of these things. And then I just finally want to end with these last few points. So many of you guys have been to Washington, D.C. This is the metro map for Washington, D.C. So their train service. And, it takes you, the red line here will take you to all of these stops, and the green line here will take you to all these stops, et cetera, et cetera. LGS is like this. This is an LGS journey road map, like a subway or train map. And you can imagine that the orange line is our research line. And if you look, this is the basic science pyramid, that we've been talking about. It only makes up a tiny fraction of everything that we have to deal with in LGS, the research line, right? It's just one, what we've been talking about today is just one piece, a very important piece, but just one piece of everything that we deal with LGS is a small 3 stops on the orange line. We've got the blue line, which is seizures and safety. We've got the yellow line, which is diagnosis and treatment. We've got the gray line, which is LGS-associated disorders like sleep, behavior, et cetera. We've got school and community, and there's more trains. I just couldn't even fit on here. And we are the experts on living with LGS. And so oftentimes patients and families will come in and start talking to scientists or start talking to doctors, and they feel like they're not smart enough or that they don't belong there. But nobody knows what it's like to live the LGS journey but us. And if a decision is made at the research level that can impact the rest of our journey map, we're not going to do it. We're not going to participate in that clinical trial because it makes it too hard to live. And so if we can come in and advise on this, we are the experts on what it's like to live with this awful disease and to prioritize it. And so I think it's just so important for us to come in and do that. We want to do that by sort of switching from just passively taking what we're given by the medical community and the science community and work to partner with them to co-produce and co-design clinical trials, co-design scientific research, co-design programs that they're going to give to us and projects that they're going to give to us and tests that they're going to make us answer for our children. We want to co-develop that with them to save time and money and lives. We need to learn from every patient. We don't do this right now. I talked a little bit about healthcare data, but there's these things called learning health systems, where every step of the way, you're learning from every single patient. It starts with a small number of hospitals might try an intervention, right? You're tracking every patient in the same way in that hospital. And let's say you say, I'm going to take all my LGS kids and I'm going to try them on this one treatment as soon as I see the LGS. And if you see a positive effect, then you recruit in the learning health system a bunch of other hospitals to try it very quickly. And once you know if it works or not, then you implement it in the whole system so that every patient moving forward gets that. These learning health systems are set up for irritable bowel disease and for a number of other diseases, but we do not have them in LGS or in severe epilepsy, and we really need them. We do not have them working. So we need these learning health systems, and they are there, and we can move them along, but we need to be learning from every patient instead of every patient being an experiment like they are now. And this is really an idea where, the knowledge goes directly into the practice. And then in clinical practice, they're collecting data. So every time they try one of our kids on a new treatment, that data is captured. And then you can start to analyze that data and see if there's a change. And it gets implemented immediately into practice once the results are set. And this is so much faster than the way things happen now. And then finally, we need to keep the conversation going. And we do have many things going on throughout the year. For the last 3 days, we've talked a lot about science, and a lot of questions have come in. If you have other questions, there is a webinar taking place on September 22nd. It's on Wednesday. I will be there. We're calling this one Ask Tracy. So come and ask me things, preferably about the last 3 meeting days. I want to be here to try to help as much as possible as we start to move towards having patients and scientists together in these conversations. We funded 2 research grants this year, and we're going to be announcing our second one very soon with all the money that we raised from the walk. And we'll be putting out our request for applications for scientists to apply for research grants again this December. So we'll keep raising money and driving the research. We're going to have a seminar series as part of the Meetings of the Mind, and our first seminar will take place on December 3rd. Seminars will be hour-long Meeting of the Minds discussions on a specific topic. The first topic is going to be current clinical trials in LGS and how to make them better. And the future topics include pre-LGS, how to measure, how to get good clinical care. No topic is not right for this as we continue the conversation about how to move the needle in LGS. And then we're bringing together all of our research grantees in December 3rd as well for our research roundtable, where the scientists that we funded in the past will come and talk about the science that we funded, so you can see what type of work is going on and what the LGS Foundation is funding. We can all do this together. I just have a couple of thank you slides. Before I do that, Jen, are there any questions? It's okay if there's not.
There's
not. Okay.
I don't believe there are. Just a moment. I actually took it off that. No, there aren't.
Okay. Thanks, Jen.
Sorry about that. I was on the wrong page.
It's all right. So I just have a few thank you slides. I want to say thank you guys to everybody before I turn it over to Natalie. I want to thank the team. This is an amazing team, and I love working with them, and they've worked so hard to put this all together. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you have new thoughts and ideas and will help us to move the science field forward faster. I thank this team for working with me and putting up with me. It's been an amazing ride and an incredible year. I want to thank the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative for the Rare as One grant. They've been teaching us all year long how to raise money and how to host scientific meetings like this and how to learn from other rare disease organizations and how to, grow our board of directors and you name it. They've been teaching us how to do that. And we really could not have done this without them. We could not have done this without our sponsors. We had 7 sponsors from this for this meeting. It was Longboard Pharmaceuticals, Takeda, Norellis, UCB, ASI, Greenwich, and Zogenix. And we really could not have pulled this off without you. Thank you so much for helping us to bring our families and our scientists together. And I thank you most importantly to all of you that came to this meeting and are sharing your stories. The patient and family voice is the most important piece. And for years, we were never asked as a group, and there weren't advocacy organizations, and now they are. And I'm just so honored to work with you guys every day. LGS sucks. All of us are sick of it. All of us want to see a better future. And all of us are here trying to make that future better for everyone else and for our loved ones with LGS. Thank you for coming. Natalie, I'm going to turn it back over to you to say a few final words. And I hope to see you guys at the Research Revolution webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. This has been amazing. It's been really a great day, and I think a wonderful opportunity for myself, and I know for all of you, to be able to get together with each other and just really talk about all of these issues that we're all seeing in our loved ones who have LGS. So this pretty much concludes our first ever Meeting of the Minds conference. It's been such an informative several days and a great start to joining our scientific community with the parent experts, which is all of you. Thank you again to all the researchers and scientists and clinicians who have participated in this. And thank you, Tracy, again. And I second what you said. Thank you to the LGS team. You're all phenomenal, and I appreciate all of your hard work. And to all of the others that also help participate in planning. Thank you again to Chan Zuckerberg and the Rare as One program. It's been a tremendous year and a half of wonderful opportunities that they have given us, and certainly this is one of them. So this is the beginning of many conversations, as we've said, to come, on finding disease-modifying therapy for LGS. So stay tuned. We'll be sending out surveys and following up in other ways. So this concludes our day. Thank you, families. We really appreciate all your participation. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.